Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have Peter Fitschen back on. We were talking off air, I think third or fourth time now at this point. So he's a vet to the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Last time we had you on, man, was May of 2023. And you said that around that time you were super lean and competing and everything like that. So that's been 2.5 years now. So welcome back
Yeah.
on. Thanks for taking time out of your day to hop on, man. It's always fun chatting with you. I feel like we always, kind of like we said, we have topics, but then we always go on other tangents and stuff like that. I feel like you're somebody I can talk to and not have a script or anything like that. So yeah, man, thanks for coming back on. How have things been going for you the last couple of years?
Yeah, no, everything's been going really well. I continue to coach full time, and my clients have had a lot of success on stage the last few years. And
Yep.
as we're recording this today, we're getting into like mid-December. So starting to have, I'm sure you are as well, some of those calls with new clients that are looking to start January 1st. I can't believe how fast this year's gone by.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. Is this like is somebody that coaches, like, I know your main clientele is bodybuilders and everything like that, which
Mhm.
congrats on your 100th pro card, man. That's freaking awesome. Good job there, dude. But
Yeah,
that's
thanks.
insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Is this kind of a busy time for you or a slower time, or are people, it's like in the off, a lot of people in the off season, I'm assuming around this time are getting ready for like spring shows?
Yeah. So this time of year is usually my slowest time of year. Most shows wrap up before Thanksgiving, and they're really outside of a couple random shows in the South. There really aren't shows till you get into March, and then like up in my part of the country, like April. And so I usually don't have people on stage before March, April-ish. And this time of year is like that in between the end of contest season and before the start of New Year's and the new January clients. So I'll still pick up a good number of clients in January, even though like 80% of my client base are competitors, but I'll pick up a good number of clients just from the fact that they don't want to be prepping over the holidays and they'll start in January. And maybe we aim for, if they're fairly lean, maybe late spring or summer, or if they have a lot to lose, maybe fall but like January it picks up. And I would say my client numbers usually hit their peak, usually like kind of April, May, June-ish most years, because people that are doing spring shows are still competing in spring shows, and people that are doing fall shows are already dieting for fall shows. So there's like the natural ebb and flow that it kicks up in January, gradually grows till spring-ish, and then as fall shows kind of finish, it drops off. And yeah, that late November, early December is usually the slowest part of the year. So it just kind of natural calendar of it, I guess, with the shows.
You try and you have a lot of your clients, again, whether they're competitors or not, it sounds like you said 80/20 there. Are a lot of them like fat loss dieting through this time, or do you try to push people away from fat loss dieting during this time? And again, assuming it probably also depends on like somebody has a show in like March or April or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the person, right? Somebody, who is trying to do show and they have X number of weeks, like they might be dieting through it. One thing I typically do, like with clients where I know they've competed before, I know about what their show weight is, I know that they can hit macros and maintain weight fairly well. A lot of my clients will start dieting like September, and we'll get the first part of it done like September through November. You spend 8 weeks, 10 weeks in a deficit, get that initial cut done, and then just maintain over the holidays, work food up, cardio down, and as much as we can while holding that lower body fat, and then pull back in the new year. And then they can be ready for those April shows or May shows without having to diet through the holidays. So I have several clients every single year where that's the approach we take, where they're starting their cut in the fall. We cut in the fall, maintain for a couple months, and go the rest of the way.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great way to diet because, like, man, it's so freaking hard to just diet straight through. And then, like you said, if you also throw the holidays in, which I feel like at the end of the day, yeah, it's a stressful time, but I feel like it does get overblown and everything like that. And it is, like you said, too, dependent on the client. You feel like someone that's a competitor, they're probably gonna push through those things a bit more than
Yeah.
someone who's not.
Yeah.
Do
Even if
you
they're not, though, even if they're not a competitor, I always try to encourage people that like the average American doesn't gain however many pounds from Thanksgiving to New Year's because they had a meal at Thanksgiving, a meal at Christmas, and some
Yeah.
drinks on New Year's. Unless you're absolutely binging, like that's not enough calories to gain a ton of weight, right? It's what you're doing most of the time that matters, and it's all the things in between. So if you can keep it tight in between, like if you're not dieting for a show, you're the average person, and most of the time is fairly tight, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, no, dude, 100% right. It's usually it's overblown, right? And I feel like it's almost an excuse at this point for sure. And I think it's also something like I've been diving into and I think super interesting is like also this time of year, I feel like here in Wisconsin, it starts to get cold and then I feel like people are just like not as active and and then they're inside more, circadian rhythm starts to get impacted, and it's just kind of this trickle down effect. And then also on top of it, it's people's like mindset of like, oh, it's the holiday season, and then I'm gonna freaking just wing it, and that's where things, like you said, start to add up because you're not
Yeah.
on top of it outside of those events.
That's always my favorite when I have clients like in the South tell me it's too cold to go out and get
Dude,
steps. And I'm like, dude, I just walked my dog in 0 degrees this morning. Like, you're
I'm glad.
complaining to the wrong person here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because that people in like California are like, yeah, it's freaking chilly out here. It's like 50. I'm like, dude, are you freaking serious? Like, that's amazing. Like, I really think that just goes to show like how kind of one, it's an easy excuse, and then two, it's just like we just get so comfortable with being in 70-degree weather all the time that anything
Yeah.
outside of that is like, oh my gosh, it's 50 degrees out. It's like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think it's to me, I would think it would be beneficial from like a physiological standpoint to put your body in sort of those different temperatures. Like, not, don't do anything freaking crazy and go outside in 0-degree weather for 30 minutes. But to me, I would imagine that would be something that is beneficial from like a physiological standpoint to get your body
Yeah.
comfortable and do those things.
Yeah, I don't know if it is or not. I would prefer probably to be in 70 degrees all year
True.
myself. It's just we got 7 inches of snow just last night, so it was an early morning of being up early and shoveling and stuff this morning. And yeah, I think I would enjoy somewhere warm. That's why every year we typically go somewhere in like late January, early February after the New Year's influx of new clients before shows start and just go somewhere warm that's not Wisconsin for a week. And yeah, just get out of it.
100%. I agree. I would much rather be in 70-degree weather too. Like you said, it's easier to say that now when I'm sitting inside and it's December. Come talk to me in
Yeah.
January and February, and I'm sure my mindset's going to be a little bit different. I'm like, all right, I'm ready for some freaking warm weather now at this point. But snow, dude, that is talk about a good cardio workout.
Yeah, my wife does a lot of the shoveling, but I also help. But yeah, we got two driveways, so I mean,
Dang.
yeah, so it's a decent amount of work.
You mentioned too, like you like to have some of your clients you split up, like, hey, do fat loss and do a little, get some off like in the beginning, take that diet break. Is that something that do you just base it on the person, or is that something that you've been finding yourself doing more often? And then off of that, do you tend to be a bit more aggressive off the bat with that?
I think it depends what we have for time. Like if somebody starts with me, if I had a call with someone January that wants to start January 1st and they say, hey, I want to compete like as soon as I can in the year, hopefully be ready by May, and I got 20 to lose, I'm gonna be like, that's a really tight timeline. Or we can push for it if we can be there, but maybe have some backup shows in mind and let's see how it goes. But like that person would absolutely not have time to do any. Where if somebody was like, yeah, we're starting prep in January, we'll compete summer, fall, they maybe only have 15 pounds, 20 pounds to lose, you know what I mean? Like, then great. We probably have time to work in some diet breaks and we probably have time to be ready early and work food up going to their show or test out some peaking stuff ahead of time. And I'm a big fan of not having show dates set from the start if you can avoid it. Get lean and then figure it out from there. Like you can have options. I think options are fine, but I'm not a fan of being like, okay, I'm going to start prep in January and I'm doing this specific date in May because there's just too many unknowns, especially if someone's a first time competitor. You just don't know. You don't know where stage lean is for them, like how they're going to look and what at those low body fats, like what weight do they really need to get down to? You don't know how they're mentally going to handle it. You don't know how how much their body's going to fight back when they get super lean. And so they're just with all those unknowns, having some show options. Okay, yeah, maybe if you're ready in time, we're doing that May show. But if not, like there are June and July options in your area to give us a little more time. And so if somebody has more time, there's more you can do. And in general, like the whole prep experience is a lot different. If somebody has to lose 20 pounds in 20 weeks, there is a certain pace they have to maintain. And if they don't, then immediately they're falling behind. Where if somebody can be flexible, and somebody can be flexible with their show dates, you know, that then, okay, yeah, this came up this week, you didn't lose. Okay, whatever. We'll just keep going. It isn't like, oh, we gotta push, we gotta go. We don't have time. And so just the experience of prep and stress level is entirely, the feel of the entire prep is different. If somebody can be flexible, that doesn't mean like we're not adjusting or we're not pushing. Like they're not losing. It's like, hey, like we gotta, if someone's inconsistent, we don't have a show date set and they're not super consistent, and we kept looking at the last few weeks and it's like, yeah, we're really only down like a pound or two this month. It was really slow. We want to get this moving a little quicker. We need to tighten things up a little with your tracking or make some adjustments or something. But So we're definitely still pushing, but like, it just isn't, we don't have to rush. There is no feeling like you're falling behind immediately.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, obviously, again, it sounds like the more time, like it's for you, you're always going to aim for, hey, let's try and have the most, not the most time possible, but again, longer is going to be better than, hey, like a nice little 3 month push. Like you said, hey, I need to get down 20 pounds in 20 weeks. It's like, and that really leaves little room for
Yeah,
air there. Like
yeah.
you have to be on top of it.
Yeah, no. And then oftentimes in those situations too, with the person who has like 12 weeks to drop 15 pounds or something, that's doable, right? There's no margin for error. And so then oftentimes they're like, this event's come, I'm going to this wedding this weekend. What do you think I can have? And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, considering we have to lose over a pound a week and you're set on this show and we have no leeway, nothing. Like you need to eat your regular prep food because we don't have the leeway to do it. Where if they had there are times and ways you can have some leeway. The person who's got to drop 10 pounds in 6 weeks or something going into a show, they don't have it.
What is that like fine line that you walk there with that of like, client comes to you, they want you to help them prep for a show, and you like, okay, hey, like, is it just you being honest of, like, I think this is a really tough time. I don't like the timeline. I just don't think it's going to work out. And like, you tell them, hey, we're not going to do that, or I'm not going to help you, or do you just have that honest conversation with them and kind of see what happens, or what does that typically look like?
Yeah. I think, especially the more years I've been coaching, you learn that it doesn't do you any good to try to help someone who has an unrealistic timeline or an unrealistic goal because they're not going to, odds are they're not going to get there. Or if they do, they're not going to be as good as they could be. If they dieted slower, they'd probably be better. And or something like that. So yeah, I always have an initial call with everyone before I even write a plan and we get started or any of it, just to make sure, are we on the same page with everything and it's a good fit. There are times where I probably have saved myself headaches with clients that clearly are not on the same page with me. And I don't think their goal is realistic. I may not be the best fit for them. I've had clients where I've told them like, hey, and I'd give them my thoughts via email when I get their client application and then be like, hey, you still want to work together, get a time set for a chat. So like, maybe it's someone who hasn't really had an off season, or maybe it's someone who is doing way too much cardio in the off season. So we have nowhere to go when it comes time to prep. And my thoughts are, hey, let's put prep off for a little while. Let's take an off season. Let's get your food up. Let's get your cardio down. Let's put you in the best spot to be successful and not just rush this, but like, be your best when you get there. And I've had people where like, I thought they were on the same page as me. And then we have the initial call and it's very clear they're not. And that's fine. Like, I think that, like I said, I probably have saved myself some headaches from that because yeah, I think too, so I think that, and then also, I try to be clear with them that like, hey, we can try for this timeline. It might not be realistic. So if you're not ready in time, like what other options are there after that? Don't commit to anything yet. Okay, yeah, you want to do the show in May. It's going to be really tight if we start in January based on how much you have to lose. What are your options in June or July if we need a little more time? Try to get them on board with, hey, if I'm not ready, let's take a few more weeks. And competing's expensive. It takes a ton of time, effort. My goal is for people to be the best they can be on stage when they step on stage, not just to do it, be the best they can be. What that means in terms of placing, who knows? That depends on who shows up and what the judges are looking for that day and all of that, right? But I think just looking the part and being where you should be and being the best you can be are typically my goals for clients.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to what you said there. Just like if somebody has a hard date that they need to do, it's like you can or not. You just push back on that a little bit of like, hey, let's be flexible here, right? Because again, like you said, ultimately, it's you want them to show up for their best self, and life happens, and there's a lot that can go on, and obviously, the tighter that schedule is, the more things need to be perfect, and we know how that goes, especially when it comes to fat loss in life and the more
Yeah,
stuff they
no,
have.
I agree. I've even had, this was years back now, but I had a really good pro who had some stuff come up in life. And we were initially targeting spring shows and it got shifted to targeting fall shows. So it went from like, hey, we're going to start prep at the beginning of the year, target spring. And then it turned into, hey, we dieted for a few months. We're maintaining for a little while. And then we're going the rest of the way for fall. They did great. And it was awesome and the best they ever were. But even someone who's an experienced pro who's been successful, like stuff comes up in life. And so I think having some of that flexibility can be really good because the stage will still be there in the fall if you're not ready in the spring or summer or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't coach people to compete, but again, when I think of like fat loss physiology, it's like managing stress on the body and just managing overall stress is like a huge piece of that. And it's like if you have the show and you're also have stuff coming up again, like you have that tight schedule, man, it's like that in itself, even if somebody is losing
Yep.
fat, like I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, but I'm assuming that's probably going to be something that could make somebody from having again, they're leaner, but like maybe they're not going to show up as their best self if they're just carrying a ton of stress and have that
Yeah.
prep.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think if someone can just relax and embrace the process, roll with it a little more, that typically it goes smoother, whether that's the fact of stress on their body or just, yeah, a lot of people, stress leads to overeating and going off plan and stuff too, but that's a whole other issue. But yeah, trying to keep stress levels down and keeping things as smooth as possible. And there's always better or worse times to compete, but I've had people prep through like
Yep.
crazy stuff in life and be successful. And like prep almost served as like the one thing they could control in life and like a positive outlet for them through something tough. And so I've seen it both ways. And I think just doing what's best for you and your timeline and your life and it is probably best as long as it's reasonable.
What is like what's the and again, I'm sure this is gonna be based on timeline and everything like that, but what is like the most aggressive you would tend to like to go from a fat loss perspective? Like, again, I know it's gonna be dependent on timeline, where the person's at, everything like that, but generally speaking, what do you feel like is the most comfortable you are in terms of aggressiveness with people in terms of fat loss?
If we're talking like prep and dieting to extremes in body fat, well, usually in those later weeks, I don't like seeing much more than a pound and a half for a guy or a pound for a woman. Earlier on, sure, if we're losing a couple pounds a week during those early weeks or a cut that's not to stage lean, or I've worked with clients who are 300 pounds, like I've worked with like 300-pound strongman competitors. And so for someone like that, if we're dropping 4 or 5 pounds a week those first few weeks, like you're 340 pounds, like that's still only like 1.5% of body weight, total body weight, right? Like it's not that crazy. And so I think it depends on the person. But yeah, if we're talking like later weeks of prep, pushing to extremes and leanness, yeah, ideally I'd like to see like pound and a half a week for a guy, maybe pound a week for a woman. And hopefully someone has given themselves enough time. That's the rate they can lose and be ready in time, and that we don't have to try to drop 2 and 3 pounds a week in those later weeks, because that's where you start to see like physiques really go downhill
Well,
visually.
for you then, I mean, because this is a good topic to think about here. Like again, it sounds obviously in the beginning you can be a bit more aggressive, like we talked about in body
Yeah.
size. It is going to be super important to that. For somebody that you're going to be working with, a competitor versus someone that just wants to get leaner, it's like that there's different questions you have to ask and certain things you have to look at. Right? It isn't just like again they have to be a certain leanness for whenever they're
Yeah.
competing. So you have to push through things that maybe you wouldn't. But are there like markers or things that you're looking at for a competitor, like later into prep of like, hey, we're probably going a bit too fast here. We need to dial back, or this is too aggressive, or is there anything that you're looking at from that standpoint?
Yeah, probably things like their adherence is a big one. If it's not going great in terms of adherence, like trying to convince them to, hey, let's like take a diet break or let's like not be as aggressive with this deficit and let's push the show date back a little bit. So again, being flexible but also like, yeah, what's strength doing in the gym? I've been doing everything the right way. Like for most people, those later weeks of prep, your strength's gone down, not up when you're that unsustainably lean. There are very few naturals that actually get stronger in those later weeks of prep, like most are weaker. Yeah, that unfortunately is just kind of part of it. Like the goal is to minimize that as much as possible. But like, probably hitting a squat PR at 3 weeks out from a show if you're lean enough. If you are, then I'd question how hard you were probably training in the off season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those type of things and just what they're looking like too visually should be looking better as the weight's chipping off. But yeah, how they're feeling, how their consistency, how they're looking, what strength doing in the gym, things like that.
And this is where I feel like for you, as someone that's getting somebody super lean for bodybuilding stage, that sort of, because again, like my thought is like for Gen Pop person, you're looking at biofeedback, right? Like we know there's going to be some hunger when you're losing body fat and you want those things to be on track. But you take someone who
Yeah.
is trying to get super lean, it's like there's going to be this mismatch of like, hey,
Oh yeah.
you're probably not going to feel your greatest either. So, and maybe
Oh,
this just comes down to your skill of like, hey, I've worked with so many people now at this point. Like I know when to push and maybe when to back off because I feel like you get that lean, it is a sense of like, hey, we need to push, but also probably this is your coaching skill coming in and getting people ready is when to back off and how to like kind of we
yeah.
talk about stress and taking some stress off the body as people get
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes down to if somebody gives me the time to allow that. If their timeline is I got to lose a pound a week and I don't have the leeway to lose less than that and I'm set on this show, then I can't really, you got to do what you got to do. Where if you can be a little more flexible with show dates, that's where you can slow it down and work in some diet breaks or back off a little if we need it. But yeah, I think just having been there myself and coached enough people, when a first time competitor says, I feel this and this, is that normal? If they're 3 weeks out with striated glutes, the answer might be yes. But if they're telling me that and they're like, if they're telling me they're absolutely starving and whatever, and like their food's not low yet and they're like 20 weeks out and they're not crazy lean, then it's like, no, that's probably not normal. You need to start looking at like, what are you actually eating? Because if your food's not high, not super, it's not high, but not super low, and you're not super lean and you haven't been dieting all that long, like you really shouldn't be starving. So what's going on here? And a lot of times when you do that and you look at what they're eating, typically in those situations, they're not eating fruits and vegetables. Their starchy carbs are coming from like rice cakes and bread and things that aren't filling. They're eating protein bars. They're drinking protein shakes. It's not a lot of actual like food. And so like, getting them to eat more whole foods and whole food starchy carbs and fruits and vegetables and actually eat their protein rather than drinking it, things like that can go a long ways towards feeling more full and more satisfied.
Yeah, looking at diet quality, that's definitely a huge one and always a first thing, right? That's what I tell people too. It's like, hey, there's going to be some hunger and fat loss, but like you said, if it's like early on and we're experiencing that much hunger, it's
Mhm.
like there's probably something from a eating habit standpoint. I'm sure even mealtime is meal timing be something you'd potentially look into as well too
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
situation.
If somebody's like starving at the end of the day and you ask them how they spread their food out throughout the day, and I typically recommend to clients like eating 4 or 5, maybe 6 times a day, and they tell me they've eaten twice and one of them was a protein shake, and then they're starving at the end of the day. I'm like, that's probably why. You need to plan to spread your food out a little more, and you probably would feel a little better throughout the day and by the end of the day. So yeah, definitely. And then like with the food quality too, typically when I'm working with clients, like I send along a fruit and vegetable minimum, like with their macros. That's pretty normal for something most of my clients have. So that like, you're still eating them. And so, especially during prep, right? So like you're getting late in prep and you're down to 100 grams of carbs a day, maybe, and you're really pushing near the end. Even in that situation, I might say, okay, get 1 or 2 servings of fruit and at least 3 servings of vegetables in your day. And typically, I'm trying to encourage people to do like whole food protein plus fruit or vegetable at each meal, and then whatever else with it. But like have that as the backbone of each meal, especially when you're getting really hungry and food's getting low, to help keep hunger as best in check as you can. But yeah, so that fruit and vegetable minimum. So if you're eating 1 or 2 servings of fruit, 3 servings of vegetables a day, that might chew up like 50 grams of your 100 grams of carbs. And now you only have about 50 grams left. And so typically for someone who's competing, a competitor, I'm usually like, okay, have that in like your pre and post workout meal, like the little bit of carbs you have left beyond your fruits and vegetables. Like we need to prioritize workouts and muscle retention. Again, that more for a competitor, right? Especially. And so I try to give people a little more structure with their macros. It's not a set meal plan necessarily, but there's some structure within their macros to try to cover some of those important things.
Yeah, at that point you have to be you have to be pretty freaking structured because if you're not, just your body's going to push you to eat more calories than you think if you're not structured, right? I just find that for a lot of people, as they start to get leaner, I'm always warning people ahead of time, like, hey, like this is going to be the point now where your body's going to start to, if you're not intentional with what you're doing, your body's just naturally going to drive you to push a surplus, whether that be through increased
Yeah.
energy intake or
Yeah.
decreasing
Yeah.
subconscious movement, right? You have to really, you have to be really intentional with it at that point in time.
Yeah, no, and I think too, if I'm working with someone who's not a competitor, typically I always try to in an initial call with them be like, listen, there will be a stop point because it's always like, where do we stop this cut? And so usually my answer to that is either when you get to your goal body composition for someone who's not competing, right? When you get to your goal body composition, either that scenario, a scenario where you're starting to feel too much of the effects of like you're super lean at the end of prep, where it's like, hey, we're getting into a place that's not sustainable anymore. You're too lean to be sustainable. Or three, you're not able to stay consistent, which oftentimes tied into number two, right? Like when you're getting into that unsustainable place, it's harder to stay consistent. And typically, if someone's starting to say I'm hungry all the time, or a woman's starting to lose her cycle or something like that, and they're not competing, it's like, hey, we need to stop this, or their strength dropping significantly, or their energy is really low, or their sleep sucks. If they're dieting for a show and you're extremely lean, you kind of got to push through a lot of that type of stuff just to get to your show, and it's temporary. You gain weight back afterwards. But for somebody who's trying to sustain the loss and progress they make, like you got to stop that cut in a sustainable place.
Yeah, no, I love that. Again, it comes back to like again, when you're not competing in a show, like you have that option to push through if you want, or it's like, hey, and there's obviously some downsides with pushing through potentially depending on where you're at. But obviously, if you're competing again, like we've talked about already, like you're going to have to push through if you want to do well in your show, right? And show up as your best self. What, but I do, you brought up too, even for someone who's not competing, like just looking at adherence, right? Like if you're continuing to run into an issue where like adherence is a problem, it's like people are always going to be, well, is it metabolic adaptation? Do I need to drop my calories? It's like, yeah, you may have to do that, but it's like if you just consistently, like your choices are not aligned with what you want to do. It's like that to me is a huge sign that you need to take a break from fat loss, even though it's like maybe from a physiological standpoint, you could keep pushing through, but from an adherence standpoint, it's like, hey, you've capped out in terms of where you're currently at, right? You don't have that drive to keep going at that point.
Yeah, no, and I think from especially for someone who's not competing, like general population, just trying to get leaner, I think the one thing a lot of people just in general struggle with is like the balance between their fitness goals and like the amount of leeway they want in their life, right? Like ultimately those two things have to align. And so I always try to explain to people like on a line, on one end is no leeway at all with life, end of prep type of scenario. Okay, so end of prep scenario, you're going to look awesome. Like you're going to be super lean and look awesome. You got no leeway. On the other extreme, you have the average American. They go out to eat most nights of the week, drink multiple days a week, have dessert every day, maybe multiple times a day. And the average American at this point is overweight, if not obese. And tons of leeway, physique wise, not probably desirable. And where in between those lines, for most people who are not competing, neither of those extremes are great. That's not where you want to be. You want to be somewhere between the two. Where do you want to be? Does being a little more flexible matter more to you? Okay, you might not be quite as lean. Are you okay with that? Do you want to be a little leaner? Then you got to be okay with being a little tighter and having less leeway. And I think for a lot of people, those two things don't line, like where they fall on that scale don't line up. Like they want to be over by the look of a bodybuilder with the leeway of like the average obese American. Not like they want to be, and so those two need to line up and you need to find a place that they do. And I feel like that's where a lot of people really struggle. People who just in general struggle because you need those two to line up. Like you need to be okay with this is how much leeway I want to have, and this is where I want my physique to be, and be okay with where they line up. And as long as you're okay with where they line up and you're a healthy person, great. You don't care. You know what I mean? Like you got to ultimately be happy and be in a place you can sustain and both from and be happy with where you're sustaining.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you say and saying, and I feel like again that in that scenario there, it's like people just think that they could just again whatever they did initially at the start of their cut is like what they can do the entire time, and then you get to that sticking point where it's like, hey, this isn't again you're but like I think that's where maybe people they don't realize that like, again as you continue to drop weight, you're in a deficit, like your body again, we've talked about this already today, the body is just going to push you to eating closer to maintenance or even a surplus depending on how lean you get. And I feel like people think that they could just rely on like, oh, I'm eating pretty good. And it's like, again, if you're not seeing those results, it's like you just have to understand too that yes, it's your choices, but also like your physiology is just going to push you towards that. And it's like you have to like again, like you said, your lifestyle has to align with that. And everybody I feel like gets to that point. And again, your skills, I think your skills and everything, habits also play obviously a huge role
Yeah.
in that as well.
And the leaner you get, like harder that loss becomes too, right? Like if I'm sitting 30 pounds over stage weight, I can drop the first 20 just tracking macros, not eating out, I'm not getting below 250 grams of carbs a day. And I can drop those 20 pounds in 4 months without 3, 4 months, 3.5, 4 months, like just typically no issue at all. Those last 10 pounds down to stage, that's where by the end, I'm down to like under half of my off-season calories, poverty macro. I think the last time I think I was down to like 43 or 45% of my off-season intake at the very end of prep. Like those last 10 are terrible. Like, there's no leeway. You got to really push. But like the first 20, you just stop eating out and pull my food back a little bit and not an issue. So the leaner you get, especially when you get to those unsustainable body fat levels, like sometimes food has to get crazy low at the end to get there. But then again, that's not somewhere that's meant to be sustained. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, especially they see social media and all the people that either are using old pictures or filters or AI or drugs or have elite genetics or any combination of those things that appear to be lean all year round. And it's not realistic for most people. You can be a relatively lean person, but like you can't walk around stage lean body fat year round.
Yeah, it's just yeah. Again, the body does not like that, and then obviously the modern
No.
environment also isn't in line with that either. What do you Is there anything that you do differently in terms of, and we can take this from a prep standpoint and just Gen Pop standpoint as well too, when it comes to fat loss for men versus women? Do you do anything like differently? Is there anything else you kind of focus on? Is it relatively the same for you, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, not really much different. If you look at most of the research, there really isn't a huge difference. I think one thing I would pay attention to working with someone who is a female, though, is especially like, for example, like when we were talking about Gen Pop, right, and ending at a place that's sustainable. If I have a female client telling me they're starting to lose their cycle or their cycle's not normal, and they're not competing, and they intend to maintain their end of their cut, like we got to wrap this cut up. We're not going leaner yet. I think just paying attention to things like that, right? And along the same lines with the competitor, right? Someone gets, you would want male or female, you would want hormones, metabolic rate, everything to be in a great spot in the off season and like fully recover from prep. But if I have a female that inquires with me and says, yeah, I haven't had a cycle in like 2 years because I've stayed like super lean and kept my food low and done a ton of cardio, and they're walking around at like 5 or 10 pounds over what they could be on stage because they've stayed so lean and been so restrictive, and now they haven't had a period in 2 years. I'm going to be like, hey, like we got to get your food up and your cardio down and like get your health in a better spot first so you can diet for a show. Because dieting down for a show and being even more restrictive is only going to make that issue worse. And things like that I would pay attention to. But again, for a male too, like if a guy came to me and said, hey, I'm eating like a guy in his 20s, 30s, 180, 190 pounds, or probably less than that, about like 170 pounds, who's pretty lean, came to me and said, yeah, I'm eating like 1,800 calories a day. Like, that's what they're truly eating, then in being that restrictive, and they want to diet for a show, it's like, we got to like address that first before we actually prep for a show.
Yeah, because then otherwise, I would imagine one, it's going to be hard for them to actually be able to continue to lean out.
Yeah.
But then also, you look at the lean body mass side of things, and then you said even like testosterone at that point is probably going to start to go
Yeah.
downhill, and that will show up in
Yeah.
many other ways too for them.
Yeah, no, if you're super restrictive for a long time, you're probably not in a great spot. Like that's because that my general rule of thumb for people has always been like, ideally, you want to spend more time out of a deficit than in
Yep.
one. Like things just like I've had people ask me that like over the years. I've dieted to stage lean 7 times since 2004, and generally it's been like every 2 to 4 years, and I'll knock out 2 or 3 shows every time I get lean, and so that'll be within like a 2 month window or whatever, and then I gain weight back and I live somewhere more sustainable again most of the time. And I've had people a lot of times ask me, well, your body just responds like it's supposed to every time. And I'm like, yeah, because after a show, I'll be out of a deficit for like a year. And then maybe I run a quick off-season cut for 3 months or something. And then I'll be out of a deficit for probably another 6, 9 months. And then maybe we work into a prep from there or something like that. Something like that. And so now I'm going into prep, and it's like I've just spent like 21 of the last 24 months out of a deficit. Like I pull back and everything's great. Versus the person who's trying to compete in the fall, and then they're trying to, you'll see this unfortunately every year, and I'll get client applications and people won't work with me because they won't like my answers, but I'll get client applications from people who just competed in November, and they're going to send client applications that want to start prep with me in January. And I'll be like, no, like it's been 2 months since your last show. You're not recovered at all. So like, that person's going to have some serious issues trying to prep if they keep doing that and never actually recovering.
And then in your situation too, where you were talking about you specifically of, hey, maybe I'll run like an off-season cut every once in a while. You're also, like you said, not doing that often. And I would imagine, again, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine you're probably less aggressive in that cut as well too, where you're not really like dipping into a super large deficit or anything for extended periods of time, and nor are you getting like super,
Yeah.
super lean either during that time.
Yeah, it might be a little aggressive just because body fat's higher and I can be, but so I can drop 16, 18 pounds in 12 weeks or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Keep it moving. But like the end of that cut, yeah, is absolutely somewhere that's still sustainable. I just knowing myself, I can be fairly healthy and strong 12, 15 pounds over stage. Like that's like minimum body fat I need to have on
Yeah.
me. I really hit PRs and make a lot of progress in the gym and feel my best and have some leeway with food, where you've probably seen this with people too, where someone tries to stay too lean, like anytime any little thing's off, like weight spikes and sticks, where like when your body's at a place that's happier, it seems like if things are off a little bit, it spikes and just comes back down. So like when I'm 20, 30 pounds over, my body's a lot happier. Like I can be healthy and be okay at 10 to 12 or 12, 15 over, but really 20, 30 is probably where I am at my best.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you bring up, right? Like it is very dependent on body fat percentage, right? Like that people, I feel like that's a variable that people tend to like overlook when it comes to like how aggressive you want to be with fat loss, or is it a good time? Like I feel like that's one kind of thing that gets overlooked because from my understanding, that really, yes, obviously if you have like super aggressive deficit, like that's could be stressful on the body, but ultimately, what from my understanding, what's really going to be the most stressful on the body is the body fat percentage, right? And again, it's probably going to be a little bit different from person to person, but that ultimately is going to be the thing that's going to drive any sort of issues that you have, right? From like hormonal perspective, things like that.
Yeah, and too, if you look at like hunger hormones and how someone feels late in prep or late in a cut, if somebody is super lean, like striding glutes lean 2 weeks out from a show, you can give them as much food as they want to eat and they're never going to be satisfied. It has nothing to do with the calories they're eating and everything to do with the body fat they're at. It is the craziest, it's a pretty crazy feeling. I think that's where people get into trouble post show is you can eat to the point like you're physically full, your stomach's distended, and you still have a drive to eat like you're because your hunger hormones are so off. And so I think that's where people get into trouble post show and just like absolutely binge out of shows and see some huge gains quickly.
And from again, my understanding, the best way to get out of that is you're just going to unfortunately have to gain some body fat to get back to that body fat percentage that you feel
Yeah.
best at. And I would be curious to hear your experience. That numbers, that body fat percentage that people are going to be at is probably going to be different from person to person as well, too, right? Like
Yeah.
you may have one guy that like once he gets to say 8% body fat, he's good to go, hunger goes
Yeah.
down and everything like that. Whereas another guy at 8% may be different. And then vice versa for women too, obviously understanding that their body fat percentages are going to be a bit higher, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it depends, really depends on the person where that recovered point is. Like I think of just some of the people I have this fall and just like comparable, like males, comparable ages, all of that, and that got lean and that they can differ from, hey, I'm 10, 15 over, I feel great, I'm recovered. Like I had a client who like 10 pounds over is like, yep, strength's all the way back up. I'm eating a good amount of food. I feel amazing, sleep good, everything's great. And he's like 10 pounds over. He's feeling pretty good again. And another one not tell me that till we got him up to like 20, 25 over. But you got to base that on the person, right? You got to keep pushing food, make sure they're gaining till they get back to a point where they tell you that. Because I want someone within the first like 1 to 2 months to be able to tell me, hey, I feel pretty normal again. And but the full recovery, like if you look at the research, like labs and metabolic rate and all of that, it may take 4 to 6 months to fully recover from prep. And I generally try to advise against a cut for at least 6 months after a show if you can avoid it. For someone who got all the way lean, somebody who, I really want someone to be able to like gain enough back quickly enough that they, within a month or two, they're at least feeling more normal. You get that initial 10, 15 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever it needs to be back on you to feel pretty good again. And I just made a post recently, like in one of my stories, one of my clients coming out of a show, and he was like 3 months or 3 weeks, sorry, post show. And we were already up to like 1,200 calories a day higher than his lowest of prep, like pushing to, I think too, a lot of people would be shocked how how much food they have to actually eat. If you stay consistent, like after your show and keep tracking to actually gain weight and gain like a pound or two a week, like you want to see coming out, like to get that couple pounds a week back on you so that initial weight comes back on in that first month or two. It is crazy how high some people's food has to get. Like, I've had clients where we're a month post show or less than a month post show, and we're eating like 1,500 calories a day or more than they were at the lowest of prep because that's where we need to be gaining that quickly. So I generally am fairly aggressive to push. And if someone can stay consistent, like we'll push hard and we'll push fast and make sure that we're getting some weight back on and that they can stay consistent. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make too, is they try to stay too conservative with their, like the old school, add 10 grams of carbs a week coming out of your show. That's not going to do anything. You're not going to gain any weight there. You're not getting any closer to being recovered from prep. And you're probably not going to be able to like actually hit that. But if I say, yeah, here's an extra like 600 calories a day initially, and hit this for a couple of days just to get some of the water weight down from like the extra food you had post show. And then we'll go up to like 800 or 1,000 over once that happens. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot easier to stay consistent. And when they stay consistent, it is crazy how high a lot of people have to get to actually gain.
And I feel like too the consistency of it, right? 'Cause I feel like probably where a lot of people mess up too is they are very like again, maybe not necessarily everyone, but I could see somebody in that scenario where like they have these peaks and valleys where it's like they eat a ton of food and then they go super low and then they you know what I'm saying? Whereas like you're saying, hey,
Yeah.
let's consistently do that. And I think people are surprised at when you consistently eat that. And again, I'm assuming I'm sure you push, hey, let's make sure that those increases in calories are relatively good choices. It's like it gets pretty challenging. And then you add in the fact too that people forget this, but your body as it adapts down is going to adapt upwards as well too, and
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it as well too.
And I always try to remind people after a show that because the people that are typically you can spot the people who are going to struggle the most post show because they either have a list of restaurants that they want to eat after their show, or they tell me, yeah, I'm going out to eat with all these different people like immediately the first week after my show because I haven't been able to, or they're stockpiling food for the end of prep, like in their freezer. Like situations like that's where those are like red flags that like it's going to go pretty badly for them after the show. And then, like you said, like the immediate reaction when someone gains too much weight and it goes up faster than they want is then they try to be super restrictive. Well, you just spent how much time dieting? Like your body's not recovered at that point. Like you just because you gained a bunch of weight fast. And so then it starts to try to get to that pendulum, right? And that you want to try to avoid where somebody you restrict and then you binge and then you restrict. And the further it goes one way, the further it swings the other way. And like you don't want that pendulum. Like a lot of times if somebody binges out of their show and hey, I'm up 20 pounds in a week and it's more than I want to be up and maybe more than I should be up, usually my response is, okay, let's set some higher macros, but like that you can actually hit consistently and let's get on track with those. And sometimes that even stabilizes their weight down a little bit, even if it's high, even if the target's high, just because it's less than they've been eating. And then, yeah, we kind of got to hang out there for a while and just let them recover from prep before we can cut or anything like that. But like, just trying to set something realistic for them to hit at that point, just to get some sort of consistency so that doesn't continue and they don't end up 40 pounds over stage or something like that, where they're going to need a 9 month prep to be ready.
Would your recommendations change if it's like, okay, hey, obviously for a competitor, it's like you've already talked about the differences between, hey, competitor's going to need to get lean past what's sustainable. Gen pop person's going to get to that point to where we want to make sure biofeedback's in a good spot. Unless you obviously want to push for whatever reason, you can obviously do that if you want to. Just again, you have to get back to where you feel good. But it's like you take someone who gets to that gen pop maybe level. Would your post diets recommendations change a little bit for that person versus the person coming out of a
Yeah.
show?
Yeah, with somebody who is Gen Pop or looking to actually sustain, someone competing should not trying to sustain the end result, whereas someone who is Gen Pop is trying to sustain the end result. So yeah, I would add food slower because the goal should be to end the cut at a place that's still sustainable. So like it
Yeah.
should be something you can keep doing. And so you shouldn't have to aggressively add food back to be able to stay consistent. Yeah, I would make an initial bump closer to maintenance and then maybe walk food slowly up more from there as we're able. But yeah, I mean, if you're truly dieting somewhere that's sustainable, like you shouldn't need this super aggressive bump in food. You shouldn't need to gain weight back to feel good after the cut. You should still be in a place you feel pretty good at the end of it. That's where like paying attention to that biofeedback and making sure that as you're dieting, you're still feeling good and everything's where it should be so that at the end of the cut, you can just sustain it rather than having to gain a bunch of weight back.
Yeah. With you having 100 pro cards under your belt at this point, man, like what do you feel have been some things that have been super helpful for you to get to that point? Would you say it's just, hey, obviously you're a super smart dude, but I didn't know if there's anything that you've, again, that maybe makes your approach slightly different or what that kind of looks like on your end there.
Good clients. But I mean, that helps when your clients are good. But I've had first time competitors come in and just kill it. I just showed just this year, OCB show, where I had a bodybuilder and a figure competitor. And there were my two clients at that show, and it was both their first shows ever. And they both swept the whole show and like novice all the way through novice masters, open, pro card, everything. And so I think, but yeah, I think good clients that are willing to put
Helps.
in work, but it helps. And so but I think things that generally have helped are things like I have clients check in multiple times a week. A lot of coaches are once weekly, and my clients check in Monday, Thursday morning. And the ones dieting, especially the ones dieting for shows, we're checking in twice a week, every week. That way, we're keeping an eye on things, making sure we're keeping the rate of loss we need to see, and making sure that there are less. It is easier for me as a coach also to do twice a week check-ins because there are less issues that can come up in 3 or 4 days. So like, issues still come up, absolutely, and we got to make adjustments and whatever. But it's a lot easier and it's a lot fresher in my mind. It's so much easier to check in with clients twice a week. and it keeps things moving, and it's great. I've gotten really good feedback from clients on that rather than just doing a once weekly check-in. I think honestly, I don't use fancy apps or anything like that. Like my updates are literally an email conversation. Like I have clients weigh in daily. They need to tell me what their weights have been since each of their last updates. If it's time for progress pictures, which that depends how close someone is to a show. The more close they are to a show, the more frequent we're doing those. I want to see those. And then they need to tell me, most of their update is them telling me in words, how are things going? And if they just send me an email with 3 numbers of their weights the last few days, usually they're getting a bunch of questions back from me. Like, I want to know, things are going well. Give me 2 sentences. Tell me things are going great, strength's good, whatever. But tell me in words how things are going. And that part I think is really helpful as well. I think that the more frequent check-ins, trying to get more than just the data on those, and then also the being flexible with shows, like we talked about, and then having those initial calls, like we talked about too, like setting realistic expectations, like making sure that, like, hey, I'm going to do this show. You want to do this show, like being like, hey, that's a great realistic goal, or no, that's not a realistic goal. Things like that, I think, are all helpful. Yeah, I think those are, and then time, just like erring on the side of more time. Almost always, if I can err on the side of more time and have a client start prep a month earlier than I maybe think they need, awesome. If they're ready early, we jump into an earlier show or we diet break along the way. And if stuff comes up, then that's fine too. We'll be fine. We'll be ready in time. I think, yeah, those things, and then just the overall experience of working with so many people over the years. There are a lot of times where like I'll have someone reversing into a show, or we're taking it day by day. I've had several situations where like a client's response has not been predictable at the end of prep. They've been lean for a while. Things aren't super predictable, where they're literally checking in every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Just send me pictures and your weight every day. And it's just a looking at like, where are we at today? Where do we need to be? And I've done some of that, and I don't even know how to describe that. That's just kind of doing it. I think it's probably all of those things, but I think too, like a big part of it too, like for someone looking to get into coaching is, especially coaching competitors, like you gotta, when they see you're as serious about it as they are, like there's more buy-in, because I can't care more and be more serious about it than they are, because it's their goal. But so like, they got to match where I'm at, where it's not going to work. And so that their best clients are the ones sending their updates in like right away in the morning on their update days, and giving me detail and letting me know if things aren't going well, and telling me and they're like matching their effort with mine. Right. And that might mean like even like show day, right? Like I'm not at someone's show, they're in a different time zone, and they're on stage at like 10 a.m. and they're on the East Coast. Like I might be waking up at 3 a.m. to get their update at like 4 a.m., so that they're getting their, before they go to get their tan done at 5 in the morning or something like that. And just, like I said, like actually like having that level of like, care and whatever. And I think that if you care, they're going to care. And I think that matters too.
100%, dude. No, I love all that. I guess another way to ask too is like, is there anything that in terms of like with your competitors and clients and stuff like that, that like maybe goes against what science would say around like fat loss or building muscle or anything like that? Like, has there been anything like that where it's like, okay, this really, again, maybe this isn't going to show up in the research, but it's like, hey, this works for this person. Have you seen anything like that's off from that standpoint or anything in the last little bit with some of your clients?
I would say like peak week as a whole, I would
Yeah.
say like the principles are the same for everybody, right? Like
Yep.
in general, you're going to want to carb up in some fashion, right? Like that applies to everybody. Typically fill muscle glycogen, fill out visually, right? Like typically somewhere during that week. Typically you're going to want to back off in the gym, back off on cardio, try to like reduce stress on the body. That can help tighten them up a little more. Typically you're going to want to avoid like super high volume foods or foods they don't do well with, especially the day of the show or the last couple days before the show or something like that. That's something I think probably applies to everybody, those things to pretty much everybody. But then it's how and when do you load, and how much do you load, and what loading pattern do you use? And because I've had people in like science, like other people in the science area that I went to grad school with, be like, well, how can I design a study on peaking? And I'm like, I have no idea, because I can give the exact same number of carbs to 2 different people, and one of them looks watery and soft for 3 days, and the other one's still flat. And you can even see that show to show. Like there are situations where somebody loads on a certain number of carbs, and we found pretty consistently a 3-day load of this. They look awesome. We've tested out ahead of time. They've done a couple shows. use that approach, done great, look great. And then all of a sudden the next show comes and they do the first day and they wake up the second day and their weight's way down and they're flatter than a pancake. And you're like, okay, so now we got to push harder and adapt and adjust. And so I think a lot of that stuff, right? Like they're the different, like I had somebody this year, I've had a couple people this year in the 4 or 5 days prior to their show load in the 2,500 to 3,000 gram of carb range over a 4 or 5 day. Yeah, these are not normal people.
Hold on. Per day or over a 5 day span?
Over that
Okay.
time. Not
Okay.
per day. No.
I was like, damn.
No.
Okay.
No, over that time. But like one of my biggest guys on stage, like largest male competitors on stage this year did a 500, 500, 600, 6 something, and then carbs, and then another like 300 plus before stage in the last days. Yeah, no. One of my guys, there was a load into one of his shows where we had to start Monday. He was so flat, and we just every day was like 500 to 700 grams of carbs for 5 days to get him filled back out. And then it was another like 300 or 400 before stage. He ate 3,000 grams of carbs from like Monday morning till stage on Saturday. Most people would be a watery spilled mess if they attempted something like that. Right? I had a guy a few years back, on the flip side, guy a few years back was 200 pounds on stage lean, 6'1", 200 pounds. One of the biggest naturals I've ever prepped. Big dude. He loaded on, like, I think we did like 250 carbs Wednesday, like 350 Thursday, and we dropped it down to like in the hundreds Friday.
Wow.
And that's all he loaded on. And he looked amazing on stage. And so like two people can be that drastically different. Yeah.
What would you attribute that to? Is it just how their body handles carbs? Is it like what can we boil that down to?
Yeah, I think some of it is probably just like their baseline, like metabolic rate. Like it's neat. And most of the difference from person to begin with is neat because BMR doesn't differ that much when you account, especially when you account for lean mass, it doesn't really differ from person to person a ton. Thermic effect of food, if you're eating a high protein diet, it's going to be a little higher, but it's not going to be drastic. And yeah, your exercise will matter, but yeah, neat and the twitching, fidgeting, lifestyle, job, all of that plays a role. And yeah, like the guy who loaded on like 3,000 plus carbs from like Monday to his show on Saturday, he was someone where worst of prep, we were down in like worst of prep. We were down, I don't know if we dropped below 300 carbs, maybe a little bit below 300 carbs, which is someone who handled a ton of food to begin with. Like I would think we're in the upper twos at the worst. We were refeeding like 500 twice a week, that type of thing, right? Like worst of prep was like upper twos, refeeding at 500. So someone that handles a ton of food. And so I think oftentimes those people that handle a ton of food need a lot to fill, also just to fill out. And it depends on how lean they get and how flat they get going into it also. And because if you run a depletion into a load, you're going to have to load harder, I think. And so a lot of times, sometimes I'll use depletions with clients where we take carbs down, fat up, and glycogen deplete into a load. I like to test that out ahead of time because if you're really depleted, you're going to need more carbs than it's not going to be like a regular refeed day where you're eating like 150 carbs a day. You have a refeed and you know how you respond. If you're depleting for a few days, now you're down here and how much more is going to take to dig out of that hole. And I've even had a couple of people where like, we really struggled to get them out of that hole. Like we just found that like we depleted them ahead of time. Like we really would struggle to get them out of that hole that they just need that much food. And so like, that's where all that differs person to person. But that's another thing too, where if you can be ready early, you can test some of that stuff out.
Yep.
If you don't need to, if you're ready a month out, 3-4 weeks out, you can say, okay, we normally refeed to 300 grams of carbs. What happens if I have like 450 or 500 gram carb refeed? Or what happens if I stack like 3 refeeds in a row? Like, how do I look after that? It gives you a better idea of like, this is probably what's best for me that final week.
And you're like judging that based on like in refeeds and what how they've responded, like to that and stuff like that. That's
how they're looking. So like, typically at like 4 to 6 weeks out, when someone's getting pretty lean, we start looking at, okay, your refeeds today. Say they're refeeding on a Saturday. Okay, take pictures Saturday morning before the refeed, Sunday morning after the refeed, Monday morning after a day removed. You have a lower day in there. Where are we best in there? Because that's going to give you an idea too of where kind of the pattern they need to have. And some people are better 2 days after. We're like loading Wednesday, Thursday or something like that, and a lower day Friday. They look their best Saturday. And so just knowing that about a person can go a long way towards just keeping it predictable that last week. And going back to stress, that helps keep stress down too, because they're not worried about, like, okay, we're changing this and this, is it going to work? If you've tested it out ahead of time, you know what's coming.
Because that would be another factor that could obviously influence how a peak
Oh
goes
yeah.
too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's that too, taking some of that stress off the body by backing off training, backing off cardio that last week. A lot of times people tighten up from that too, and
Yeah.
just backing off training, inflammation drop and things. And so it's not uncommon to see someone drop another pound or two that last week just from pulling back in the gym and dropping some of the inflammation and stress from training hard.
Yeah. So it sounds like at the end of the day, like peaking, it's yeah, obviously you're basing it off of what they've done in the past. Again, what's worked, I'm assuming with other people as well too. But again, it sounds like the peaking is really individual, and it's I don't want to say a guessing game, but it almost is in a sense, right? Like good idea, but it's a little bit up to chance of like what specifically is going on and how.
Yeah, and that's where you testing things out ahead of time to make sure
Yep.
it's an educated guess
Yeah, right.
and not just like doing random stuff.
Yeah.
And then also like the pictures every day, right? So somebody's loading 4 and 5 days into a show, and we're like maybe we're doing like a backload where the carbs get higher as the week goes on, Tuesday through Friday or something like that, and they're at their highest Friday. They look great after carbs. We know, but like, you might have to adjust day to day based on what you're seeing, because if you're not seeing them fill out like you would expect, or if they're really filling out very quickly, you might have to pull those later days back. And so that's where too you see them throughout prep. Like I see so many pictures of someone dieting for a show. I've seen them all prep, sending me just regular check-in pictures around refeeds, pictures around testing out like carb loads. Like I start recognize, you can start recognizing like on this person, I really notice this and this when they're flat or versus full and things like that. And you can start picking up on some of those details so that you can tell the difference when they're sending you stuff the last week based on and adjust based on that.
What do you, so when you do this and you increase their carbs, are you worried about, I'm assuming you are, but like you watch calories. So if that's the case, do you really have to manipulate protein and fat, or is it just, hey,
Calories are going up at that. If they're super, if you're trying to fill them out, calories got to go up. They're not
okay,
going to, calories aren't going up, then you're not like, you
get
have
to
to
those
fill out.
that carb level anyways as well too.
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes too, I'll even add a little bit extra fat with it too. Sometimes that helps people fill out a little more. I don't know if that's intramuscular triglycerides or for somebody who's just burning through carbs really fast, just giving a little extra fat. I don't know if that's another substrate for the body to burn. But like oftentimes if I'm really struggling to get someone to fill out and we're just seemingly loading countless amounts of carbs, just bumping the fat up a little bit tends to oftentimes help.
Like how large of a surplus do they tend to, do you try to watch like what, or is again, it just depends on the person?
Yeah, I'm not even hardly paying attention to calories at that
Gotcha.
point. To be honest, to
Yeah.
be honest, I'm just looking at, okay, we've done a couple days that we did, I don't know, 250 grams of carbs and 350 grams of carbs, and you're still really flat. Like we got to probably get up. And based on what I know about them and what I've seen, because everyone has a limit, right? You load them too far, they spill over, they get watery, they get soft. And I think, and so just kind of knowing where that, having an idea of where that person's limit is too, is I think important also. And again, the more time you have, the more shows you have with someone too, the better it go. The more preps, the more shows. If somebody can do multiple shows within a year, we're probably tweaking things for that second and third show based on what we saw with the peak at the first one. That can make a pretty big difference, right? Like I had a client just this last year or this last fall where it was his first show and we didn't really have time to test things out ahead of time. We're pushing for fat loss up till the end, and we had to take a more conservative load just because we weren't really sure how far beyond a refeed can we go. We knew looked good after a refeed, but like, can we stack a couple of these together? How far beyond that can we go? In that situation, oftentimes I'll start loading a little bit earlier in the week, Wednesday or Thursday, just to give me a little buffer if I need to pull back, if I don't know, but or maybe even earlier in some cases. And so he did his first show, did all right. And then we had a couple weeks till his next show, and we were able to drop like another pound of body fat. And then we took a much more aggressive load because we saw, based on how he looked after that first show, he could have handled more. And we pushed like a 5-day load much, much harder. And he looked awesome, won his pro card, and was best he ever looked. Of his 2 shows he did this year, best he ever looked. And had he not done a second show, we wouldn't have had, like, we learned from that first one. We had to be a little more conservative. We just didn't know the first time. And then we found, okay, we can be a lot more aggressive. And then we were.
Man, that's crazy. That's all that's always like concern, like not concern me, but I've always wondered how, like, to me, that is an art to be able to do that. I think having a good coach in your corner can be super helpful because, like you said, not only do you have to, like you said, to educate a guest, but it still is
Yeah.
somewhat of a guess. And then you also have to be able to go in and be like, hey, we need to back off or we need to push it more. And
Yeah, and it's not like I always make the right. I don't want people to think like I make the right calls
yeah,
100% of the time
100%.
because you can talk to some of my clients where I didn't, and I'm like, okay, we need to do this and this differently the next time because clearly that was not the best thing to have done. It's like I said, I mean, from experience, I've gotten a lot. I've coached full time for over a decade now and was part time before that. So I've had seen enough different people and things that I've gotten obviously better at it, like anyone would,
Yeah.
just with repetition and experience. But yeah, I think just making sure that after the show, a lot of times I'm talking with clients about, okay, next time I would do this and this differently. And if they're doing more than one show, like fortunately, in many cases, we get a chance to do it a little differently. And I've even had times where people won shows and I'm like, yeah, that still wasn't quite the look we could have gotten. Let's do this for the next one. So yeah, I don't know. I find that part of it really fun, especially like you get clients who are serious and want to be at their best and you're tweaking those small details and you're consistent enough that those little things are going to matter and you actually see it and you can
Yeah.
like make predictable changes. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's that. Yeah. That would be cool to be able to really have that kind of like really be able to dial those things in for people. I do real quick before we let you go, man. I want to just talk about your training and what you're currently working on. I think you said you hadn't really prepped for a couple years. So I'm just curious kind of where you're at in your journey and what you're cooking on right now.
yeah, I ran a cut and got somewhat lean recently, but yeah, I don't know. I'm fairly lean at this point, not stage lean. So still sustainable, but leaner. I turn 40 next year. We'll see what happens with client shows and things. 'Cause a lot of especially the last few times I've competed, a lot of it depends on clients, right? And finding shows in a time of year where I don't have. I've had 5 clients compete on the same day as me. I've had 3 a couple different times. And so I can compete on the same day I have clients. It's not that big a deal. I just don't want to have, I try to avoid shows where like the OCB Viking this last year, I had 12. There's no way I'm doing a show with 12. So I try to figure whatever I do, I try to work around where can I compete, when can I compete, and around what clients are doing and things like that so that I'm not taking away from them as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, I'll be the first one to tell you I'm a better coach than I am a bodybuilder. So I've done all right bodybuilding, but at least I feel like I'm a much better coach than I am a bodybuilder.
I can't. Do you have your pro card? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
you
So
did.
I have competed as a pro in the NGA and the IPE. IPE is not around anymore. They merged with WMBF now. And I also did like NMA, which is a small sanction. I don't know if they're around anymore as a pro. And yeah, I've done all of those as pros. I have a WMBF pro card when IPE merged with them. I'm still an OCB amateur though, so they don't take outside pro cards, and all of that changes every year. Like when I have clients say, "Oh, who takes what pro card?" or "Can I compete at this show or that show in 2 years?" I'm always like, I have no clue. Like natural bodybuilding changes so much year to year, like what sanctions exist, what shows exist, who accepts whose pro card, who's merged together, who's not. Like it is ever changing. And so we'll see what's around when the time comes and I'll figure something out. It'd be fun to do some 40 plus classes though, because next time, because I competed as a teen. I did a couple preps in my 20s. I did did 3 preps in my 20s, 3 preps in my 30s, and keep it going.
So, what's your kind of training look like right now?
Yeah, so I've worked with Cliff for my own nutrition
Yeah.
and training. I worked Cliff for my nutrition since like 2014. It's so much easier to
Wow.
not think about it myself.
Yep.
Yeah, he and I have been working together for like a decade plus. And just having someone I trust to just tell me what to do. Because when it's yourself, it is so easy to just overthink every little detail.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
you look at a client and you look at the client and it's like, oh, yeah, this is what they need to do. You can objectively step back. But when it's you, you just overthink everything. And so having someone else. So yeah, so I've done Cliff's training for most of this off season. Yeah, right now I think the split I'm running is it's a fairly basic, just lower push pull off, lower upper off, and there's a five, yeah, lower push pull off, lower upper off 5 day.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard split. There's a quad focused leg day, a ham glute focused leg day. You know, what I do on that second upper day alternates a little bit week to week, but It's a fair, you know what I mean? Like nothing that crazy. His programs have a lot of volume and some intensity techniques and sometimes some crazy rep ranges. Some of them are pretty nuts
But
and get long, but fortunately I have the ability to spend the time I need there.
tends to be somebody that is more of like, hey, like we want to kind of get because there's a shift now. I feel like of like, oh, you need to be low volume all the time, and I feel like Cliff's kind of always been a
Yeah.
guy that's a little bit like on the higher side. Again, I'm sure he makes it very personalized to what the client needs, right? That ultimately is the most important. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a plan that he had me do where we really pushed the volume and I made it through like half of it. Like I got through half of it, went on vacation for a week, didn't lift, came back, did like one more week, and I'm like, I'm just
done.
not recovering at all. There's no way I can get through the rest of this. And so we found my limit, but yeah, no, it's not low volume. I've tried to play over the years, play with low volume, and I like the concept of it. But I am someone who looks better when I train with quite a bit of volume. I like the preps where I've done where I was like most happy with how the stage shots turned out in my look. I was training with a decent amount of volume, and some of the best preps I've had and best looks I've had on stage. Like I were some stupid long workouts and crazy volume. It just seemed to be like. Unfortunately, like, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it seems to be where I looked best for just low volume. I just never, I didn't ever look as good. But I love the idea of just going in and burying myself on like just give me a hack squat and tell me to go till I can't go and I will go and crush myself. But I don't grow as well from it. Just, yeah.
You tend to work like a couple reps from fail, or what where are you typically at with
Yeah,
that?
depending on the movements, some are a couple rep or two from, most of them are fairly close, but like where the bar is actually dropping on me, I don't do that all that often unless like here and there where he specifies I should. Like, I don't do a whole lot of, but there's a lot of like training to the point where like, if I went for one more rep, it'd probably fall on me. So like those last reps are hard. I barely get it, but I wouldn't, if I went for one more, I'd probably get crushed.
What do you consider like higher volume? 'Cause I think that's also like what the hell is higher volume? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I think most of the programs I've run from him, lower end of volume, maybe like 16, 18, 20 sets in a workout. Higher end of volume, we're in the 30s
Per workout, you're saying?
per workout. Yeah,
No,
working set.
no, obviously if you're doing you said one of your days is an upper, right? So it's like obviously that's spread out between multiple.
Yeah, a 30 set push day is spread out between like chest and shoulders and like
Yeah.
tricep or something like that. It's not, or a high volume leg day, you're doing quad work, you're doing glute ham work, you're doing calf work, adduction, stuff like that.
So what would you say then on average, like your like per muscle group per week, you're gonna be to typically be at? And again, I understand it's probably gonna be based on the muscle group and everything like that.
Yeah, we've run specialization plans where like we ran an arm one where I think I was hitting like 25 sets each of by try a
That's
week
insane.
or something like.
Your tendons held up during that?
Yeah, it was, and I have an elbow that's just historically not been great, but
Yeah.
it's been all right. As long as I pick the right movements
Right.
and,
Execution.
it's not all super low rep, it's been okay.
Yeah.
And so I think some of that, yeah, I don't know. I tend to, like, I'm sure like you or anyone who's been lifting for a while, I've probably tweaked almost everything over the years, but like, knock on wood, I haven't had anything too major. And I oftentimes forget like how old I actually am. Like I'll be 40 in less than 2 months. But I go in, I don't have kids. I work from home. I've done the same job, lived in the same house for over a decade now. I'm actually settled somewhere after moving around a bunch with school and stuff as an adult. And so I don't know, like, there's nothing to me that shows me how much time is going by. And so like, go in and I forget which is probably a good thing that I don't feel what my age is. And I just keep training. And I have clients in their 50s and 60s that are like, oh, just wait. But yeah, no, it's gotten to the point now though where I had a kid the other day ask me, how long, wow, that was really impressive. I was doing like RDLs with 365 or something like that. And he's like, oh, really impressive. How long you been lifting? And I had to think, and I was like, like 24, 25 years or something like that at this point.
Yep.
And he's like, I'm 18. It's like, oh
Time
no.
baby. Yep. Yep. And I think too, you kind of hit on it, like somebody like you that you compete and stuff, and then you kind of mentioned your recovery. You're able to recover pretty well, so it's like I think you'd be the perfect person to really try and push volume and see how much you can really do. Because it's like you have the time, like you have the time you want to dedicate to it, and you have the recovery resources,
Yeah.
right? Like you would be somebody that's like, yeah, I think you really should try and push your volume on certain muscle groups.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, just given the schedule that I keep, especially in contest seasons, like when I have clients updating me early in the morning, a lot of times, and even on regular client check-in days now, like I'm at my computer at 4:30 in the morning on Monday and Thursday morning, 5 a.m. most of the other days during the week. And It could be earlier as we're getting closer to shows with people in the East Coast and stuff when they send updates. And so like I have to get up really early. And so like to get enough sleep, like I'm someone who sleeps from like 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. or something like that, because that helps with recovery too, right? I get enough sleep. I'm just given when I want to be up and the response time I want to have to clients that are close to shows and things like that, we'll get updates early because when you have a timeline, even if they're like 6 weeks out from a show, right? And they check in on a Monday, I want checking in before work at, I don't know, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Like I want to be able to get back to them fairly quickly and be like, hey, let's change this and then. So that way we're not losing time. We don't lose that day. You only have 6 weeks. Or if they checked in late in the day, there's not really anything I can change. You know what I mean? Like if they check in really late in the day, I might be sleeping and it might be like Wednesday before I tell them to change something Tuesday and they might actually do it by Wednesday. And when I want the updates and the response I want to get back to keep things moving, like I've just shifted my sleep schedule around that. I know of other coaches that get up super early and, you know what I mean, in the morning like that too, and are getting people's updates and back to them early so that they can keep things moving. I'm not the only one.
You're like, I'm not the only one. Yep. No, man, that's awesome, dude. And it was good to catch up with you, man. A ton of great information in here around fat loss and everything like that. So where can people find out more about you and where can they find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at FitBodyPhysique. My website's fitbodyphysique.com. Those are probably the best spots. My book's on Amazon. I came out like 6 years ago now, Bodybuilding, the Complete Contest Prep Handbook. Yeah, it's been translated into two dialects of Chinese, Italian, and German.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's available in 5 languages. And so I have the other ones sitting here and I don't know what any of them say other than the English one, but like it's pretty cool.
No, that is insane. That's freaking awesome, man. Differently. Yeah. Like, I don't even know what it says. You know what it says, but you don't exactly know what it says, right?
Yeah, like you're just taking their word that it was translated well, right?
I really appreciate your time. Thanks for hopping back on again. It was fun to catch up with you, and we'll obviously do this again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.